The ink on the divorce papers wasn't even dry when the champagne corks popped. They laughed as she walked out of the courtroom with nothing but a failing subsidiary and her maiden name. They called her weak. They called her a gold digger who failed to dig deep enough. But they didn't look closely at the fine print. They didn't know that the woman they just discarded wasn't leaving empty-handed. She was leaving with the trigger to a nuclear bomb that would destroy their empire. The celebration was loud, but her silence? Her silence was about to be deafening. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Pembroke Tower felt less like a legal setting and more like an execution chamber. The air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature, a subtle psychological tactic designed to make the weaker party uncomfortable, to make them want to sign quickly, just to leave the room. Catherine sat with her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple beige coat, one that she had owned for 5 years. Across the mahogany table sat Ashton Pembroke, her husband of 6 years, and his shark of a lawyer, Mr. Gower. Beside them, looking bored and checking her nails, was Jessica, the woman who had been wearing Catherine's diamonds for the past 6 months. "Sign here, Catherine," Ashton said, sliding the heavy document across the table. His voice was smooth, lacking any trace of the affection it once held. "And here, this concludes the transfer of the useless assets you requested. Honestly, I don't know why you want the logistics branch. It's bleeding money. But if it makes you feel like a businesswoman, be my guest." Mr. Gower smirked. "It is a generous offer, Mrs. Pembroke. The logistics division has accumulated $20 million in debt. Ashton is essentially absolving himself of a liability and letting you take the fall for it. But per your request, it is yours in exchange for waiving all rights to the Pembroke Global shares." Catherine didn't look at the lawyer. She looked at Ashton. He was handsome, in that sharp, predatory way that had charmed her a decade ago. Now he just looked like a stranger in a $3,000 suit. "I understand the terms," Catherine said softly. Her voice was steady, though they mistook her quietness for defeat. "Just sign it, Cat," Jessica chimed in, blowing a bubble with her gum. "We have a reservation at Le Bernardin in an hour. We're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Catherine asked, picking up the fountain pen. "The future," Ashton answered, his eyes cold. "My future." Without dead weight. Catherine uncapped the pen, the nib scratched against the thick paper. Catherine J. Sinclair. She signed her maiden name. It felt like taking a breath of fresh air after drowning for years. "Done," she whispered. Ashton snatched the papers away immediately, handing them to Gower as if afraid she might change her mind. "Finally. You have 48 hours to vacate the penthouse. Take whatever personal items you want, but the art and the jewelry stay. Those belong to the Pembroke estate." "I've already packed," Catherine said, standing up. She picked up her worn leather purse. "I don't want the jewelry, Ashton. I never liked how heavy it felt." "Sour grapes," Jessica laughed, linking her arm through Ashton's. "Come on, baby. Let's go. Your mother is waiting for us at the club." They didn't even watch her leave. They were too busy admiring the signed decree, the legal document that ensured Ashton kept his billions, his real estate, and his tech empire, while dumping his bad debt onto his naive ex-wife. Catherine walked out of the glass doors and into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, hiding Ashton's laughing face from view, her posture shifted. The slumped shoulders rose. The timid expression vanished, replaced by a gaze of icy determination. She pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed a number. "It's done," she said into the receiver. "The logistics division is mine. They think it's a graveyard." A deep voice on the other end chuckled. They have no idea that the graveyard holds the exclusive shipping contracts for the entire eastern seaboard. You just walked away with the supply chain, Catherine." "I know," Catherine said, stepping out into the lobby. "Let them celebrate, Arthur. Let them drink their champagne. The hangover is going to be brutal." The Sapphire Lounge was the most exclusive club in the city, the kind of place where a bottle of water cost more than a car payment. Tonight, the VIP section was roped off for the Pembroke family. Beatrice Pembroke, the matriarch of the family, held her crystal flute high. She was a woman who wore pearls the size of grapes and had a smile that could freeze hell over. "To my son," Beatrice announced, her voice carrying over the low hum of jazz. "Free at last from that drab little mouse." The table erupted in cheers. Ashton sat at the head, looking like a king. Jessica was draped over his shoulder, already wearing the Pembroke sapphire necklace, an heirloom that was technically supposed to be Catherine's until the divorce was finalized, but no one cared about technicalities tonight. "She really took the logistics division?" Beatrice asked, laughing as she sipped her vintage Dom Perignon. "That old warehouse district down by the docks? Why?" "She thinks she can turn it around," Ashton mocked, swirling his drink. "She has this delusion that she's an entrepreneur. I told Gower to let her have it. It's going to go bankrupt in 3 months, and she'll be stuck with the liquidation costs. It was the perfect way to ensure she never comes back asking for alimony. She'll be too busy drowning in debt." "Brilliant," Beatrice cooed. "Absolutely brilliant. That's why you're the CEO, darling. You cut the rot out." The mood was electric. They discussed the upcoming merger with Vanguard Tech, a deal that would make Ashton the richest man in the state. The media was already calling him the Bachelor of the Year again. In the corner of the room, a man in a grey suit was watching them. He wasn't drinking. He was taking notes on a tablet. Ashton noticed him and waved a waiter over. "Who is that? Get him out of here. This is a private party." The waiter looked nervous. "I'm sorry, Mr. Pembroke. That gentleman is a guest of the club owner. I can't remove him." Ashton scowled but ignored it. He turned back to Jessica. "Tomorrow we announce the engagement. The press will eat it up. Billionaire upgrades. It'll be the headline of the week." "I love it," Jessica squealed, kissing his cheek. Suddenly, the music in the club stopped. The lights dimmed, and the large screens behind the bar, usually playing abstract art loops, switched to a live news feed. It was CNBC Global. "Turn that off," Beatrice snapped. "We are celebrating." "Wait," Ashton said, holding up a hand. He squinted at the screen. That's our logo." On the screen, a breaking news banner flashed red. "Pembroke Global Stocks plummet in after-hours trading." The room went silent. The news anchor, a grave-looking man, was speaking rapidly. In a shocking turn of events, Pembroke Global's primary supply chain partner, previously known as Pembroke Logistics, has just issued a cease and desist order on all Pembroke shipments. This effectively halts production for the tech giant immediately. Ashton stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "What?" The anchor continued. "This comes minutes after the announcement that Pembroke Logistics has been acquired and rebranded as Phoenix Supply Chain, under the sole ownership of a private entity. Experts are saying that without these shipping routes, Pembroke Global cannot fulfill its contracts with Vanguard Tech. The merger is in jeopardy." Beatrice dropped her glass. It shattered, mirroring the hook of the story, but this time the fear was real. "Ashton? What does this mean?" "Pembroke Logistics. That's the trash you gave her." Ashton's face went pale. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he tried to unlock it. "It's impossible. She doesn't know how to run a supply chain. She doesn't even know how to file taxes." "Who is the owner?" Jessica asked, her voice shrill. "Who is Phoenix Supply Chain?" On the screen, a press release appeared. It was signed by the new CEO. The signature was bold, elegant, and familiar. Catherine J. Sinclair. "She didn't just take the warehouses," Ashton whispered, realizing the horror of his mistake. "She took the licenses, the grandfathered shipping permits, the ones we can't get anymore because of the new environmental laws." His phone rang. It was the CEO of Vanguard Tech. Ashton answered, his voice shaking. "Hello? Pembroke!" The voice on the other end roared. "What is playing on the news? My logistics team tells me our components are locked in your port, and the new owner of the port is demanding a renegotiation of fees at 10 times the previous rate. You told me you controlled the supply chain." I did. I do," Ashton stammered. "It's a clerical error. My ex-wife. She—" "Fix it," the Vanguard CEO screamed, "or the merger is dead, and I will sue you for breach of contract." The line went dead. Ashton looked up. The entire club was staring at him. The celebration had died instantly. "She planned this," Beatrice hissed, her face contorted with rage. "That little snake planned this." "She can't do this," Jessica said, looking at the sapphire necklace as if it might suddenly disappear. "Can she?" "She just did," Ashton said, grabbing his coat. "We have to go. Now." "Where?" Beatrice demanded. "To the docks," Ashton spat. "I need to talk to Catherine." The drive to the industrial district was a stark contrast to the glitz of the city centre. The Pembroke limousine wound its way through potholed streets lined with rusted fences and towering cranes. It was raining now, a cold, relentless drizzle that made the grim scenery look even more hostile. Ashton, Beatrice, and Gower the lawyer were in the back. Jessica had been sent home in a taxi. This was war, and there was no room for accessories. "You said the division was worthless," Beatrice seethed, glaring at Gower. "On paper it was." Gower defended himself, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It was 20 million in debt. The assets were depreciating. Who knew she realized the value of the permits? Those permits are tied to the land, not the parent company. When you transferred the deed, the permits went with it." "Shut up," Ashton snapped. "We just offer her money. She's broke. She'll take 5 million and give it back." They arrived at the main gate of what was now Phoenix Supply Chain. To Ashton's surprise, the place wasn't dark. It was lit up like a stadium. Trucks were moving in and out in a synchronized ballet of efficiency. The rusted gates he remembered were gone, replaced by high-security reinforced steel. A guard stopped the limo. "Name?" "Ashton Pembroke. I'm here to see Catherine," Ashton demanded, rolling down the window. "CEO Sinclair is in a meeting," the guard said impassively. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need an appointment. I'm her husband, ex-husband," Ashton shouted. "Wait here." 10 minutes passed, then 20. Ashton was boiling. Finally the gate opened, but they weren't directed to the main office. They were directed to a warehouse floor. The limo pulled in. Ashton stepped out into the humid, noisy air of the warehouse. It smelled of diesel and sea salt. In the center of the vast space, standing on a metal catwalk overlooking the operation, was Catherine. She wasn't wearing the beige coat anymore. She was wearing a tailored white suit that looked sharper than anything Ashton owned. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was loose and flowing. She looked powerful. She looked dangerous. She descended the metal stairs, the heels of her boots clicking rhythmically. She didn't come alone. Flanking her were 2 men, Arthur, her advisor, and a man Ashton recognized from the news, the union head of the dock workers, a man named Big Mike, who hated the Pembroke family. "You look lost, Ashton," Catherine said, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the warehouse. She stopped 5 feet away from him. Cut the act, Catherine, Ashton barked, marching toward her. You've had your fun. You scared the investors. Congratulations. Now sign the rights back over to me. I'll give you $5 million. That's more money than you've ever seen. Catherine laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was genuinely amused. 5 million? Ashton, do you know how much cargo moved through this port in the last 4 hours since I took control? She gestured to the crates behind her. $12 million worth of lithium batteries for your electric cars, and they aren't moving an inch until I say so. This is extortion, Beatrice screamed, stepping out of the car. You ungrateful girl! We took you in. We gave you a life. You gave me a cage, Catherine corrected, her eyes narrowing. And you treated me like a pet. You mocked me for reading the company briefs. You laughed when I asked questions about logistics. You thought I was stupid. But while you were buying yachts, I was reading the shipping laws. What do you want? Ashton asked through gritted teeth. 10 million? Name your price. I don't want your money, Ashton, Catherine said, stepping closer. I want your seat. Excuse me? The merger with Vanguard, Catherine said calmly. It requires a unified supply chain. Vanguard won't sign with you if you can't guarantee delivery. And you can't guarantee delivery without me. So here is the deal. Arthur handed a document to Ashton. You will step down as CEO of Pembroke Global, Catherine stated. You will retain your shares, but voting power transfers to me. I will facilitate the merger with Vanguard, not as your wife, but as the CEO of the acquiring partner. You're insane, Ashton spat. I'll never sign that. I'll sue you. I'll bury you in court. Go ahead, Catherine shrugged. Mr. Henderson, how long will a court injunction take to clear the shipping freeze? Minimum 6 months, Arthur replied smoothly. By then the Vanguard deal will be dead, and Pembroke Global stock will be worth, well, less than the paper this divorce decree is printed on. Ashton looked at the document. He looked at his mother. Beatrice was pale, clutching her pearls. She knew the math. She knew Catherine was right. I'll give you 24 hours to decide, Catherine said, turning her back on them. But the price goes up every hour. Oh, and Ashton? He looked up, defeated. Get off my property. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside the Pembroke mansion was just beginning. Beatrice Pembroke paced the length of the Persian rug in the library, a glass of scotch trembling in her hand. The grandfather clock chimed 3 a.m., a hollow sound that echoed the emptiness of their current position. Stop pacing, Mother, Ashton muttered from the leather armchair. He had loosened his tie, and his hair was dishevelled. You're making me dizzy. We are losing millions by the hour, Ashton, Beatrice snapped, turning on him with the ferocity of a cornered tigress. Do you understand? The stock dropped another 12% since the market opened in Tokyo. If we don't break her hold on the port by morning, the board will call for a vote of no confidence. You will be out, and she will be right. I told you, Gower is working on an injunction, Ashton said weakly. Gower is a fool with a briefcase, Beatrice hissed. Laws take time. We don't have time. We need a scalpel. We need to cut the cancer out before it kills the host. She walked over to her mahogany desk and pulled out a burner phone from a locked drawer. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Who are you calling? Ashton asked, sitting up. Victor, she said. Ashton's face went pale. The fixer. Mother, that's dangerous. If anyone finds out we hired him. No one will find out, she said coldly. Catherine wants to play with the big boys in the shipping yards? Fine. Let's see how she handles a federal investigation. At Phoenix Supply Chain, Catherine hadn't slept. The adrenaline was the only thing keeping her upright. She sat in the glass-walled office that overlooked the shipping containers, reviewing manifests with Arthur. "We have the Vanguard shipment held at Bay 4, Arthur said, pointing to the blueprint. "The drivers are ready to move, but per your orders, the engines are off." "Good," Catherine said, rubbing her temples. "Keep them off. Ashton hasn't called in 4 hours. That worries me. He's impulsive. Silence means Beatrice is involved." "You think they'll try a legal maneuver?" Arthur asked. "I think they'll try something illegal," Catherine replied. She stood up and walked to the window. "Beatrice doesn't believe in laws. She believes in winning." Suddenly, the radio on Arthur's belt crackled. It was Big Mike, the foreman. "Boss, we got a problem at the North Gate. Police, and not the local beat cops. We're talking feds, customs and border protection." Catherine's heart skipped a beat. "What do they want, Mike?" "They have a tip-off." Mike's voice was grim. "Anonymous source says there's a shipment of unregistered narcotics in container 404. "That's one of the Pembroke containers, Catherine." Catherine looked at Arthur. Her face hardened. "Container 404. That was processed yesterday afternoon, before I took full control." "It's a setup," Arthur said, realizing the implications immediately. "If they find drugs in a container under your license, they shut down the port instantly. Your permits get revoked. The assets freeze. Pembroke Global steps in as an emergency measure to manage the crisis." "They planted it," Catherine whispered. She grabbed her coat. "Let's go." By the time they reached the ground level, the scene was chaotic. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the stacks of metal crates. K9 units were barking. Agents in windbreakers with Federal Agent emblazoned on the back were swarming container 404. A man in a sharp suit, clearly the lead agent, was directing a team to cut the lock. "Stop!" Catherine shouted, marching toward them. "I am Catherine Sinclair, the owner of this facility. I want to see a warrant." The agent turned. He had a face like carved granite. "Warrant is right here, Ms. Sinclair. Probable cause. We have credible intelligence that this facility is being used to smuggle synthetic opioids." "That's a lie," Catherine said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. "This is a retaliatory move by a disgruntled business rival." "We'll see," the agent said. He nodded to his team. "Open it." The metal doors groaned and swung open. The dogs immediately started barking and pulling at their leashes. The agents moved in, pulling apart crates of computer chips. "Here," one of the agents shouted. He pulled out a taped brick of white powder from inside a hollowed-out server case. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. It was there. The evidence that would ruin her life. "Catherine Sinclair," the lead agent said, turning to her with handcuffs in hand. "You are under arrest for trafficking." "Wait!" A booming voice echoed across the yard. It was Big Mike. He was holding a tablet high in the air. "Don't put those cuffs on her yet, Agent." "Back off," the agent warned. "I said wait." Mike walked up, flanked by 4 burly dock workers. He shoved the tablet into the agent's face. "You might want to see this footage before you make a mistake that'll cost you your badge." The agent paused. He looked at the screen. It was a grainy, high-contrast video from a security camera. The timestamp was 2:15 a.m., just an hour ago. It showed a man in a black hoodie scaling the back fence, cutting the seal on container 404, placing the package inside, and resealing it with a duplicate lock. "We upgraded the security system 6 hours ago," Catherine said, realizing what Mike had done. "My ex-husband didn't know we installed thermal motion sensors in the blind spots." The agent watched the video. He zoomed in. The man in the hoodie turned slightly. His face was obscured, but the logo on his gloves was visible. It was a distinctive crest. "That's a private security firm logo," the agent muttered. "Not just any firm," Catherine said, stepping forward, her confidence returning in a rush. "That's Titan Security, the firm exclusively hired by Pembroke Global for their executive protection." Catherine looked the agent in the eye. "You're being played, agent. This wasn't smuggling. This was corporate sabotage. And if you arrest me, you're an accomplice to a felony frame-up." The agent looked at the drugs, then at the tablet, then at Catherine. He lowered the handcuffs. "Secure the scene," the agent barked to his team. "Nobody leaves. And get me the number for Titan Security. We have some questions." Catherine let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She looked at Mike. "Thermal sensors?" "I figured Beatrice wouldn't play fair," Mike grinned. "So I spent a little of the budget on insurance." Catherine smiled. It was the first time she had genuinely smiled in days. "Send a copy of that video to the press," she commanded Arthur. "And send another copy to Ashton. Tell him his fixer just became my star witness." The headline the next morning was not the one Ashton had paid for. Instead of "Ex-wife arrested in drug bust," the Financial Times screamed, "Pembroke scandal, sabotage at the docks." Ashton threw the tablet against the wall of his penthouse. It shattered, sending glass across the pristine marble floor. "How did she have cameras there?" he screamed. "There were never cameras in Sector 4. That was the blind spot." "She changed it," Beatrice said, sitting on the sofa, looking significantly older than she had the day before. Her hands were shaking. The police had already called Titan Security. It was only a matter of time before the trail led back to her burner phone. "She's smarter than we thought." "We're done," Ashton said, sinking into a chair. "The Vanguard deal is dead. Dominic Hale is going to pull out. He hates scandal." "Not if we spin it," Beatrice said, desperation clawing at her voice. "We blame a rogue employee. We say we had no knowledge." "It doesn't matter," Ashton yelled. "We still don't have the chips. The factory lines at Vanguard are stopped. Hale is going to sue us for billions." The intercom buzzed. It was the doorman. "Mr. Pembroke, Mr. Dominic Hale is here to see you." Ashton and Beatrice exchanged a look of pure terror. Dominic Hale, the CEO of Vanguard Tech, the man known as the Iron Wolf of Silicon Valley. He never made house calls. "Send him up," Ashton choked out. 2 minutes later, the double doors opened. Dominic Hale walked in. He was a man who commanded a room simply by existing. He was tall, with broad shoulders and eyes the color of cold steel. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing black jeans and a black turtleneck, looking like a tech billionaire who could buy and sell the Pembroke family 10 times over. "Dominic," Ashton said, standing up and extending a hand. "I can explain that—" Dominic walked past him, ignoring the hand. He walked straight to the window, looking out at the city. "You have 6 hours, Ashton," Dominic said, his voice deep and calm. "6 hours for what?" "To get my supply chain moving," Dominic said, turning around. "My factories are silent. I am losing $400 a second. You promised me a seamless transition. Instead, I turn on the news and see your family playing gangsters at the docks." "It's Catherine," Beatrice interjected, standing up. "She's holding the cargo hostage. She's unreasonable." Dominic looked at Beatrice. His gaze was dismissive. "I don't care about your domestic squabbles. I care about competence. And right now, the only person who seems competent is the woman holding the keys." "She's a gold digger," Beatrice cried. "She's the owner of the port," Dominic corrected, "and she seems to be the only one anticipating your moves. You tried to frame her, didn't you?" Silence filled the room. "I did my own digging," Dominic said. "Your Titan security guard is currently cutting a deal with the FBI. He's naming names." Ashton collapsed back into his chair. "So here is how this goes," Dominic said. "I am going to the docks. I am going to meet this Catherine Sinclair. And if she can convince me that she can run that logistics node better than you, I am going to sign the transport contract with her directly." "You can't!" Ashton gasped. "The contract is with Pembroke Global." "The contract has a force majeure clause." Dominic smiled coldly. "Criminal investigation into the CEO constitutes a breach. I can void it today." He walked to the door. "If I were you, Ashton, I'd call your lawyers, not for the merger, for your defense team." An hour later, a black Matt helicopter landed on the helipad of the Phoenix Supply Chain warehouse. Catherine watched from the catwalk as Dominic Hale stepped out. The wind whipped his dark hair, but he looked unbothered. He looked like a man coming to inspect a weapon. She walked down to meet him. She didn't offer a hand. She just nodded. "Mr. Hale," she said. "Ms. Sinclair," he replied, scanning the warehouse. He saw the efficiency. He saw the upgraded security. He saw the workers, who weren't slouching but working with renewed energy under Big Mike's supervision. "You run a tight ship," Dominic noted. "I have to," Catherine said. "My ex-husband likes to try and sink it." "I heard," Dominic said. He looked at her, really looked at her. He expected a scorned ex-wife. What he saw was a general in the middle of a battlefield. "You have my chips." "I do. Container 405 through 450. They are secure, climate-controlled, and ready to load," Catherine said. "Why aren't they moving?" "Because Pembroke Global hasn't paid the new tariff," Catherine said simply. "The tariff you jacked up by 400%? Dominic asked, raising an eyebrow. "The tariff that covers the cost of the new security measures required to stop corporate sabotage," Catherine countered without missing a beat. "Quality costs money, Mr. Hale. You know that better than anyone." Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It was the first time he had smiled in a business meeting in years. "I like you," he said. "I don't need you to like me," Catherine said. "I need you to sign the new contract with Phoenix Supply Chain, independent of Pembroke Global." "If I do that, Ashton goes bankrupt," Dominic said. "That's not my problem," Catherine replied. "My problem is ensuring your chips get to your factory. Do you want them there by morning, or do you want to wait for Ashton to bail himself out of jail?" Dominic laughed. He pulled a pen from his pocket. "Where do I sign?" The annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital was the highlight of the social season. It was where the city's elite pretended to be charitable while showing off their wealth. Tonight, however, the atmosphere was tense. The rumors of the Pembroke implosion had spread. Ashton and Beatrice arrived, trying to keep up appearances. Ashton wore a tuxedo, but he looked like a ghost. Beatrice was covered in diamonds, but her eyes darted around the room nervously. They needed to find investors. They needed cash flow immediately to fight the legal battles coming their way. "Smile, Ashton," Beatrice hissed through her teeth as cameras flashed. "If we look weak, the sharks will attack." "We are weak, Mother," Ashton whispered. "Dominic Hale hasn't answered my calls. The stock is in free fall. The banks are calling in the loans." They made their way to the center table. The room was buzzing with gossip. People were whispering behind their hands, looking at the Pembrokes with a mixture of pity and glee. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. A hush fell over the ballroom. At the top of the grand staircase, Catherine Sinclair appeared. She wasn't wearing the beige coat. She wasn't wearing a business suit. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her figure, with a slit that showed a glimpse of leg. She wore no jewelry except for a simple pair of diamond studs. She didn't need jewels. She radiated power. And on her arm was not Arthur. and not Big Mike. It was Dominic Hale, the room gasped. Dominic Hale, the billionaire who never attended galas, was escorting the discarded ex-wife of Ashton Pembroke. They descended the stairs together, looking like the royal couple of the New World Order. Ashton stood frozen, his champagne glass tilting dangerously in his hand. No. Catherine led Dominic straight through the crowd. The sea of people parted for them. She walked right up to the Pembroke table. "Good evening, Ashton." "Beatrice?" Catherine said pleasantly. "You have some nerve coming here." Beatrice spat, her voice trembling with rage. "With him?" "Dominic insisted," Catherine said, glancing at the man beside her. Dominic looked at Ashton with cold amusement. "I wanted to thank you, Ashton." "Thank me?" Ashton asked, confused. "For releasing Catherine," Dominic said. "Best business decision you ever made. For me, at least. Phoenix Supply Chain is now the exclusive logistics partner for Vanguard Tech. We signed the deal this afternoon." The color drained from Ashton's face. "Exclusive? But that means Pembroke Global has no contract," Catherine clarified. "And without the Vanguard revenue, you can't service your debt. Which is why," she signaled to a waiter, who handed her a silver tray. On the tray was not a drink, but a thick envelope. "What is this?" Ashton asked. "A tender offer," Catherine said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Since your stock price is currently tanking, and the banks are calling your loans, I am offering to buy Pembroke Global at current market value." "You want to buy my company?" Ashton laughed hysterically. "With what money?" "With the advance Dominic gave me," Catherine smiled. "And with the backing of the bank, who prefers my management style to yours?" "I will never sell to you," Beatrice shrieked. She raised her hand to slap Catherine. It happened in slow motion. Beatrice's hand flew through the air, but before it could connect, Catherine caught her wrist. Catherine's grip was iron. She didn't flinch. She just held Beatrice's hand in midair, staring into the older woman's eyes. "Don't," Catherine whispered. The single word carried more threat than 1,000 screams. She released Beatrice's wrist with a shove. Beatrice stumbled back, catching herself on the table. "Read the offer, Ashton," Catherine said, smoothing her dress. "You have until midnight. If you don't sign, the bank forecloses tomorrow morning, and you walk away with nothing. If you sign, you get to keep the penthouse, and enough money to disappear quietly." She turned to Dominic. "Shall we dance?" "We shall," Dominic said, offering his arm. They walked onto the dance floor. The orchestra began to play a waltz. Catherine and Dominic moved together perfectly, the flashbulbs exploding around them. Ashton stood by the table, holding the envelope. He looked at his mother, who was sobbing into a napkin. He looked at his ex-wife, spinning in the arms of a billionaire who looked at her with genuine respect. He opened the envelope. The number at the bottom was low, insultingly low. It was pennies on the dollar. But it was more than zero. "Sign it," Beatrice whispered, defeated. "Sign it before she takes the clothes off our backs." Ashton uncapped his pen. As he signed his name, giving away the empire his grandfather built to the woman he had thrown away, he realized the cruelest twist of all. She hadn't just taken his money. She had taken his narrative. He was no longer the protagonist of his own life. He was just a footnote in hers. The morning sun hit the glass facade of Pembroke Tower, but for the first time in 80 years, the mood inside was not one of arrogance, but of frantic evacuation. The news of the acquisition had broken at midnight. By 8 a.m., the lobby was swarming with security, not the old team that turned a blind eye to Ashton's excesses, but a new team wearing the insignia of Phoenix Supply Chain. Catherine stood in the center of the lobby. She hadn't slept, but she didn't feel tired. She felt electric. She wore a charcoal grey suit, sharp and severe. Beside her stood Arthur, holding a clipboard that contained the list of employees who were to be retained and those who were to be escorted out. The elevator doors opened, and Ashton stepped out, carrying a cardboard box. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His tie was missing. His eyes were red-rimmed. Behind him trailed Beatrice, clutching her purse as if it contained the crown jewels, and Jessica, who was sobbing loudly into a silk handkerchief. "This is humiliating," Beatrice hissed, refusing to look the security guards in the eye. To be paraded out like common criminals. "You aren't criminals yet, Beatrice," Catherine said, her voice cutting through the lobby's murmur. "Though the audit team is currently going through the accounts, so I wouldn't get too comfortable with that assessment." Ashton stopped in front of Catherine. He gripped the cardboard box tighter. "You won. Are you happy? You took my company. You took my home." "I took back what I put in," Catherine said calmly. "I spent 6 years managing your life, Ashton. I covered for your missed meetings. I smoothed over your insults to investors. I wrote the speeches that got you standing ovations. You thought I was just a trophy. You forgot that even trophies are made of metal." Jessica stepped forward, her mascara running down her cheeks. The arrogance she had displayed at the divorce signing was gone, replaced by a pathetic desperation. "Catherine," Jessica whimpered, "please, you have to help me. Ashton says he's broke. He says the settlement money is frozen by the bank. I have a lease on a condo. I have car payments." Catherine looked at the woman who had helped destroy her marriage. She didn't feel anger anymore. She just felt pity. "You wanted him, Jessica," Catherine said coldly. "Now you have him, all of him, without the billions to hide his personality flaws. I hope the lease is in your name, because Ashton has a history of defaulting on his obligations." "He promised me," Jessica screamed, turning on Ashton. "You said you were untouchable. You said she was a nobody." "Shut up," Ashton snapped at his mistress. "Can't you see she's enjoying this?" "I'm not enjoying it," Catherine corrected him. "I'm working, and you are blocking the flow of foot traffic. Security, please escort Mr. Pembroke and his entourage off the premises." 2 large guards stepped forward. Ashton flinched. He looked at the reception desk, at the marble floors, at the empire he had inherited and lost in record time. He tried to muster some dignity, straightening his spine, but as he walked through the revolving doors and onto the street, the paparazzi were waiting. The flashes were blinding. Questions were shouted. "Ashton, is it true you're bankrupt? Beatrice, do you have any comment on the hostile takeover? Jessica, are you staying with him?" Catherine watched from the safety of the glass lobby. She saw Jessica push Ashton away and hail a taxi, leaving him standing alone on the curb with his mother and his cardboard box. "Brutal," Arthur commented, standing beside her. "Necessary," Catherine replied. She turned her back on the window. "Now, let's go upstairs. I want to see the books, all of them, the ones Gower tried to hide." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was silent. When the doors opened, the executive suite was already being transformed. The dark, heavy oak furniture Ashton loved was being covered. The air smelled of change. Catherine walked into the CEO's office. It was a massive space with a panoramic view of the city. She walked to the desk where he had forced her to sign the divorce papers just days ago. She sat down. The chair was high-backed and comfortable. It fit her perfectly. "Arthur," she said, opening the top drawer. "Get the forensic accountants in here. I want a deep dive into the charity initiative accounts. Ashton was too desperate to get that money at the gala. It wasn't just greed, it was panic." "You think he was dipping into the funds?" Arthur asked. "I think Ashton Pembroke hasn't made an honest dollar in his life," Catherine said, booting up the computer. "And I'm going to find out where the bodies are buried." It took 3 days for the forensic accountants to find the discrepancy. It wasn't a simple case of embezzlement. It was a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts that would have made a cartel boss blush. It was late Tuesday evening. Rain lashed against the windows of the tower. Catherine was sitting on the floor of the office, surrounded by stacks of paper. Dominic Hale had come by an hour ago, bringing takeout food and a bottle of wine, but they hadn't eaten. They were too focused on the spreadsheet projected onto the wall. "There," Dominic said, pointing to a recurring transaction. "See that? Consulting fees paid to a firm in the Caymans. $50,000 a month, every month for 5 years. That's $3 million, Catherine calculated. But what for? Ashton didn't have consultants. He thought he knew everything. "Look at the recipient code," Dominic said, leaning in. He smelled of expensive cologne and rain. "Alpha 79. That's not a consulting firm. That's a routing number for a high-risk gambling syndicate." Catherine gasped. "Gambling? Ashton? He was losing money," Dominic explained, his eyes scanning the data with the speed of a predator. "He was betting on everything. Horses, stocks, underground poker. And he was losing bad. When his personal accounts dried up, he started siphoning from the company. And when the company started struggling, he went after the charity fund," Catherine finished the sentence, feeling sick. "The Children's Hospital Gala. That's why he was so desperate for the donations. He wasn't raising money for sick kids. He was raising money to pay off his bookies before they broke his legs. He stole $4 million from the hospital fund last year alone," Arthur said from the doorway, holding a fresh stack of printouts. His face was grim. "Catherine, this isn't just corporate fraud. This is federal wire fraud and embezzlement of charitable assets. This is 20 years in prison, minimum." Catherine sat back, the weight of the revelation hitting her. She had known Ashton was selfish. She hadn't known he was a monster. "If we release this," Catherine whispered, "the Pembroke name is destroyed forever. Not just the business, the legacy." "The legacy was destroyed the moment he dipped his hand into that jar," Dominic said softly. He sat down beside her on the floor. "The question is, do you want to be the one to bury it?" Catherine looked at the projection. She thought of the hospital. She thought of the sick children who never saw that money. She thought of Beatrice, looking down her nose at everyone while wearing diamonds bought with stolen funds. "He tried to frame me for drugs," Catherine said, her voice hardening into steel. "He tried to ruin my life to cover his tracks. He would have let me go to prison." She stood up and walked to the desk. She picked up the phone. "Who are you calling?" Dominic asked. "The district attorney," Catherine said. "I have a crime to report." The arrest happened the next morning. It wasn't at a gala or a club. It was at the motley little apartment Beatrice had rented in the suburbs, the only place they could afford. News cameras captured the moment the FBI kicked down the door. Ashton was dragged out in handcuffs, wearing sweatpants, looking disheveled and terrified. Beatrice was screaming at the agents, threatening to sue, until an agent showed her the warrant that listed her as an accomplice for co-signing the fraudulent checks. They were placed in the back of separate squad cars. The image of Ashton Pembroke, the golden boy of the city, pressing his face against the barred window of a police cruiser, was plastered on every screen in the country. Catherine watched it from her office. She didn't feel triumph. She felt a profound sense of closure. The rot had been cut out. The infection was gone. Dominic stood by the window, watching the city below. "You know everyone is terrified of you now," he noted with a smirk. The Iron Lady of Logistics. They say you took down an empire in a week." "I didn't take it down," Catherine said, turning off the TV. "I just stopped propping it up." "What will you do with the hospital money?" Dominic asked. "The lawyers say you can recover about half of what he stole from his frozen assets." "I'll match the rest," Catherine said immediately. "From my personal earnings. The hospital will get every dime they were promised. Phoenix Supply Chain will sponsor the new pediatric wing." Dominic nodded approvingly. "That's a good start. But you have a bigger problem now." "What's that?" "You have a massive global conglomerate to run," Dominic said, walking over to her. "And you have a vacancy for a strategic partner." Catherine smiled. She walked around the desk and stood in front of him. "Are you applying for the job, Mr. Hale?" "I don't do partnerships usually," Dominic admitted, his voice dropping an octave. "I work alone. I find people slow me down." "I noticed," Catherine said, "but I think you'll find I keep up pretty well." "Better than well," Dominic murmured. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, a stark contrast to the cold business transaction that had started their alliance. "You're the most formidable woman I've ever met, Catherine, and I find myself unwilling to walk away from this deal." "Is this a business merger?" Catherine asked, her heart beating faster. "Let's call it a hostile takeover of your heart." Dominic smiled. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was possessive, passionate, and real. It was the kiss of two equals who had found their match in the chaos of the world. 6 months later. The winter had turned to spring. The Pembroke Tower had been renamed. It was now the Phoenix Tower. The logo on the top of the building was a stylized bird rising from the ashes, illuminated in gold against the night sky. Catherine stood on the balcony of the penthouse, the same penthouse she had been evicted from. She had bought it back from the bank, gutted it, and redesigned it. The cold marble was gone, replaced by warm wood and vibrant art. It felt like a home, not a museum. The city lights twinkled below. The shipping reports on her tablet showed record profits. The Vanguard tech merger was a massive success, revolutionizing the industry. Phoenix Supply Chain was now the #1 logistics provider on the East Coast. But Catherine wasn't looking at the tablet. She was looking at the reflection in the glass door. Dominic came out onto the balcony, holding 2 glasses of red wine. He had loosened his tie, looking relaxed in a way the world rarely saw him. "To the announcement," he said, handing her a glass. "To the announcement," Catherine echoed, clinking her glass against his. Earlier that evening they had held a press conference, not to announce a merger, but to announce the opening of the Sinclair Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing legal aid and financial literacy to women going through high-conflict divorces. "You're going to change a lot of lives with that foundation," Dominic said, leaning against the railing beside her. "I just want to make sure no woman has to sign a paper she doesn't understand because she's afraid," Catherine said. "Knowledge is leverage. I want to give them leverage." "You certainly gave Ashton a lesson in leverage," Dominic chuckled. "I heard he took a plea deal. 15 years. Beatrice got 5. "I don't think about them anymore," Catherine said honestly. And it was true. They were ghosts, shadows of a past life that felt like a bad dream. "Good," Dominic said. He set his glass down and turned her to face him. "Because I need you focused on the future." "Oh, does the great Dominic Hale have a plan?" "Always," he said. He reached into his pocket. Catherine's breath caught. He pulled out a small velvet box, but it wasn't the size of a ring box. It was flat and rectangular. He opened it. Inside was a key, an old iron key. "What is this?" Catherine asked. "It's the key to a villa in Tuscany," Dominic said. "It overlooks a vineyard. No Wi-Fi, no stock markets, no shipping manifests. And what am I supposed to do with it? Go there with me, Dominic said. Tomorrow, for 2 weeks, we disappear. We let the VPs run the companies. We take a vacation, a real one. Catherine looked at the key, then at Dominic. For 6 years, she had asked Ashton for a weekend away, and he had always been too busy, too important. Now, the busiest man in the world was offering to shut down his empire just to spend time with her. 2 weeks? Catherine raised an eyebrow. The board will panic. Let them, Dominic shrugged. I don't answer to the board, and neither do you. We're the kings and queens of this jungle, remember? Catherine smiled. She took the key from the box and closed her fingers around his hand. 2 weeks, she agreed. But I'm driving. Dominic laughed, pulling her into his arms. I wouldn't have it any other way. As they stood there, high above the city, the wind whipped around them, but they were warm. Catherine Sinclair had lost a husband, a home, and her reputation. But in the fire of that loss, she had forged something unbreakable. She had built an empire, found justice, and discovered love that was based on respect, not ownership. She looked out at the skyline one last time. The city that had once mocked her now bowed to her. She wasn't the billionaire's wife anymore. She was the billionaire, and the crown fit her perfectly. Catherine's journey from a discarded wife to a titan of industry proves one thing. Never underestimate the person who knows where the bodies are buried, or in this case, where the cargo is hidden. She didn't just get revenge, she got justice, and she did it by being smarter, working harder, and refusing to accept the narrative written for her by others. In a world full of Ashtons, be a Catherine. Know your worth, read the fine print, and never be afraid to burn the bridge if it lights your way to a better future. What did you think of Catherine's master plan? Would you have forgiven Ashton, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs some inspiration, and subscribe for more dramatic stories of underdogs taking back their power. Thanks for watching.